Have you ever been on a date with someone that talked over you? Do you seem to be attracting only self-involved people that are more interested in an audience than in an intimate relationship? Well, if so, then you are really going to enjoy this video segment because I'm going to answer a common question through the framework of energy healing and attraction. And this is an approach that I take in my online course, Energy Expansion 101, which is available now for enrollment until the end of the month. So by the end of this segment, you are going to understand what attracts partners like this into your life. You're going to be able to ditch worthiness as a construct for earning an ideal mate. You're going to understand why all the right things that you've been doing just don't work, and also have an opportunity to take an advantage of what will work. Now, if you are new to my online community, welcome. My name is Brianna McWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist with more than 15 years in the field helping adults struggling with insecure attachment go from self-doubting to self-sovereign so they can call in the soul-shaking, passionate partnerships that they want, and without years of therapy with no tangible result. Now, today, I wanted to pop in and do this live stream event to answer a common question that pops up inside my private student group, Facebook student group, for people that have taken my online courses. And this is a question that I get a lot, so I'm going to paraphrase this here for you. I recently went on a date with someone who seemed promising. He talked a lot on the first date, and I thought it was cute, but I thought he might be nervous. On the second date, he also did the majority of the talking and even cut me off at one point because he just wants to finish his story. Now, I keep attracting men who don't listen to me. I think that this guy hasn't learned anything about me. I'd rather be alone than feel like I'm a fangirl over some guy. Maybe I'm just not healed enough to be dating yet. So I'd love it if you can type there in the comments or in the chat if this sounds like a familiar story, either for you or for someone you know. Now, if you can relate, I might offer a reframe here, and that is when you were looking at this situation and we're saying to ourselves, he's telling me so much about himself, which means that he's not listening to me or he's not making space for me. So that means that I can't find my way in here. There's no room for me. So when we have a narrative like that going on in our heads, you want to ask yourself, what do you know about that kind of story? What is your relationship to inhabiting space, fighting for space, invading space, shrinking to avoid taking up too much space, right? How has that narrative evolved in your experience? And at the same time, this particular individual indicated that they had a history of dating partners that were emotionally unavailable or withholding or more avoidant in nature. So individuals like that are typically qualified by being very withholding of themselves. They don't actually share so much. And now this person has encountered somebody that's sharing a lot about themselves. So which one is it, right? Do we want someone that shares a lot about themselves, or do we want someone that withholds it? That's sort of an irrelevant question. What is actually the most important thing to recognize here is the spectrum that is being expressed. A lot or not enough, right? So the next thing we might say is, or I might ask this person, which one do you want? And the next thing they might say is, well, actually, I want someone that shares a lot about themselves, but still makes room for me. And I might respond to that by saying, well, that sounds like you're working out your boundaries. You're figuring out the difference between too much and too little. And maybe in the past, you thought that you have been too much or too intense, while at the same time, not enough. Or you were filling up too much space with a kind of desperate need for connection. And now you're working on creating space for someone else in a new and different way. And so this date has presented an opportunity for you to do that in a much more intentional way. And maybe you learn something about that experience of too much or too little in this scenario. I'm going to explain more about what I mean by that. So maybe this person is not the one for you, or maybe he's someone that's waiting for you to insert yourself instead. Are you waiting for an invitation from him? Maybe he's writing messages to his friends saying, I don't know, I feel like I'm carrying the whole conversation and she hardly offers anything. Does she want a written invitation? Or maybe he really is just egotistical and self-absorbed and doesn't notice that he's not an active listener. Or maybe he's neurodivergent and doesn't know how to pick up on social cues and communication. Whatever the answer or the truth might be, what we can get out of this is noticing what's coming up for you in your feelings and in your inner space, when, that's like the real gold when we're trying to understand why we keep attracting something similar into our lives. Now, this person also mentioned, maybe I'm just not healed enough to be dating yet. So this is an important point to make. This suggests that there is an underlying mechanism going on where this person is not really listening to themselves. They think they're not enough of something, healed enough to get what they deserve, the ideal mate that listens. Otherwise, she'd have it already, right? So there's a part that says, you're not worthy enough yet. And there's another part that says, what do you mean? Yes, I am. Look at all this hard work I'm doing. And then there's still another part, and that's the part I really want us to listen to here today, that says worthiness has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. And that is the part that is going completely unheard. And that is the part that then attracts in someone who doesn't listen. Okay. So in my course, Energy Expansion 101, which is currently open for enrollment, and there's a link to that in the caption of this video, we touch upon this conundrum very specifically. And how do we do that? Well, we dig into the 2 chakras where this inner narrative around worthiness and validation and all of it is really born in early development, usually pre-verbally or non-verbally, and that is through the root and sacral chakras. This also happens to be where the ego is in its earliest stages of development, and it starts splitting things into categories, good or bad, in or out, worthy or unworthy. And you cannot change these things, the energy that these things create with talk therapy or intellectual insight alone. You really have to be working on these things holistically. That means with mind, with body, and through experiential things. It requires developing a symbolic emotional language, which you can then embody physically, play with experientially, and then assign words to it. Okay. Now, because spirit, source, our higher power, the essence of you does not acknowledge this worthiness validated or invalidated system of checks and balances. Okay. And looking to nature really allows us to understand the true and awesome power that you have to sit fully and sovereignly in your power without having to accept some ideal of being the best version of yourself and then working and efforting a lot to get there, to be healed enough to get the A grade, and then you'll get an A partner, right? The rock does not justify its stillness. The wave does not need to be validated as worthy enough to crash against the shore. And the sun does not need to earn its right to love by rising to the summit every day. And so too are you, an expression of nature that needs only to relax into your place in this grand scheme and spiritual collective ecosystem. And once you relax into this far deeper knowing and understanding about yourself and your purpose for being here, your relationships, romantic or otherwise, they will make sense and they will fall into place. Your attractive energy is going to be lit up like a lighthouse, and you will have your pick. So then the task of discernment comes in, and that is the lesson of being a spiritual being, having a physical experience. So bringing this back to the date, practically speaking, in a situation like this, I might say something like, you know what? Let's get a little meta. What would you say are the most creative getting to know you questions that you've ever heard? Or I would completely avoid that line of inquiry and change the nature of the conversation. I would turn it into a game of metaphor exploration. Hey, let's play a game. I'm going to give you 2 completely unrelated things, and you have to tell me which one you would choose and why. Then you have to ask me. So for example, would you choose spoons or books, and why? So the point of this is I want you to think of it like a sandbox. Imagine that you are building castles and knocking them down, and you are enjoying it as you do so. And eventually you will find a playmate who wants to spend more and more time with you knocking down and building the same castles. Okay, now let's say you say to me, okay, I like that. I'll chew on that, Brianna. But I was engaging and I tried to insert myself in the conversation. And I'm in no way shy. I'm not waiting for an invitation, but I do attract men who are self centered and it feels like they want someone to just stroke their ego. I am tired of negotiating for my turn or my needs to feel important, and I would rather be alone. Okay. So maybe let me know in the chat or in the comments if you have connected with that feeling, right? That's one that's well known to me personally and with my clients. So there's 2 points that I want to make about this. And the first is I would have you notice what is the feeling that is being expressed in the moment. We have a lot of thoughts that were communicated, but what's the feeling? Right? So I want to be heard. I'm trying to be heard. I'm sick of not being heard. All of those are evaluations of how somebody else is responding to you. What's the feeling? Maybe it's a feeling of vacuousness. Maybe it's a feeling of emptiness. Maybe it's a feeling of non-existence. Maybe it's a questioning of, do I exist because no one's listening or responding to me? Am I of value? Right? So what does that create? It creates a driving desire. I will be heard. No one's going to stop me from speaking. And no one's going to be able to tune me out. Right? So we drive back at it with this other kind of energy, fighting against that inner vacuousness. So then who do we attract? Well, we attract a mirror of that, someone that will be heard no matter what. So, and this person in this scenario even stops her from interrupting him so that he can finish his story and will be heard. But now you see in this date mirroring that energy back to you, you see that kind of energy makes you, the person now on the receiving end of it, feel shut out. No dialogue can evolve. You're rejected. There's no shared evolution. There's no opening for that. And so that's the great mirror here for the energetic spectrum or the string, let's say, that has been plucked in your vibration, in your energy body, in your unconscious. And so swinging from one end of the spectrum of need suppression, dating unavailable, withholding men that make it unsafe to have needs or speak them aloud because they'll leave you if you dare, right? Swinging all the way over here to the other end, which is bursting with needs, making sure that anyone and everyone will hear them no matter what, because you're sick of being so contained and repressed, right? So this is the string that we are plucking. This is the spectrum that we are swinging on from one end to the other, right? And then, of course, there's the circumstance when we are bursting, but we pretend that we aren't because we don't want to scare someone off or be unappealing. And that winds up creating mixed signals in the relationship because your energy is not matching up with your words or your actions. And then the chemistry dies because it's unsafe for the other person and for you, really. And you're completely emotionally unavailable while totally overwhelmed by your emotions. So it's important to swing along. It is important to swing along this spectrum at a certain phase of healing and growth because it means that you get to map out the terrain in between. You get to have dates like this. They're not a failure. They are a successive approximation. They are a tool by which you get to start to create the space that you would need to actually call in the massive energetic flow that you are asking for with an ascended partner. Because it is mirroring back to us our extremities, whether it's one end or the other. It's mirroring back to you the spectrum, the string that is plucked, right? And that is so that you can learn to negotiate the more balanced dance of giving and receiving, listening and sharing, and exchanging ideas instead of validating them, okay? And that brings me to the second point. Now, the underlying assumption that is being mirrored back in this situation, or let's say that we are understanding the person to be inhabiting in this situation, is men must hear me or I am not being heard. And if they don't validate me by listening or by creating space for me, I'm better off alone and I don't want to date. But when you believe a lie like that, it means you're not listening to yourself and you're not creating space for yourself. Okay. You're not listening to yourself when you rely on your dates to listen to you and to validate you and to motivate you. Relative strangers, particularly rude or ignorant ones, should not have that kind of power or authority over your interest and investment in exploring the varieties of life and playing in the great sandbox of love and relationships. I think I'm just tired of negotiating for my turn or my needs to feel important. I'd rather be alone. Well, you want to try to feel your needs are important with or without someone else validating them, especially a rude or egocentric one, right? So the validity of your needs, thoughts, or your feelings, it's not on the table at any point in any situation. Nothing about that is questionable, negotiable, or ever on the table. Why not? Because you are the rock. You are the wave. You are the sun. Nothing an egotistical loudmouth says changes the fact that you are a divine creation. So this scenario kind of reveals that on some level, this person, or if you relate to them, you think relationships are a negotiation for your right to have needs, your right to express yourself and to show up to the world of love and to claim what's yours within it. Okay. Whenever we have that mentality, that ego-based thought, we are in take or get mode. And that kind of energy is operating beneath the surface. And then there's usually an assumption that if love is not a negotiation, or if I'm not willing to negotiate for my feelings, then I'm going to be left alone and no one's going to care for or love me. Because who would want me if I'm not meeting their needs or they're not meeting mine? And what is love outside of a needs negotiation? Well, it's quite a lot more than that. So those are the underlying thoughts that I would have you start to actively work on reframing, because they're creating a kind of energy and vibration that will draw into your experience people that you have to negotiate with, whether it's being heard, whether it's choosing what you do for activities, the list goes on, right? So these are people who will assign their love to the conditions of the material world. Whereas I believe that, I believe that love, I should say, and the conditions of compatible values and priorities, they are two very separate but often interwoven threads. And they need to be recognized as distinct if we are ever going to attract a spiritually ascended partnership. And that is often what my incredibly curious, smart, savvy, and spiritually aware clients are usually looking for. So if you are working hard on yourself with the goal of finding a secure relationship with no results to show for it, realize that a lot of common sense or even self-help and personal development out there is overly concerned with the content of relationships and not the energetic life of them. So conventional wisdom says, be the change you want to see. And so you think you have to improve yourself to finally get the love that you deserve. You have to earn it. Now, these days, that might translate into things like yoga retreats, meditation retreats, clean eating, acupuncture, psychics, crystal grids, manifestation workshops, dating workshops, and a home library of self-help and personal development books, all of which I personally love and engage with myself, okay? But burning yourself out on the right things in order to make yourself better, and therefore finally deserving enough to just relax into love, that is more of the same kind of toxic energy that attracts you to emotionally unavailable or overly controlling partners in the first place. Okay, so here is the secret. Entertaining that kind of energy is going to exacerbate your problem. Now, you might see some movement on the surface. There might be some things that do move the needle because you're getting closer and closer to it. But if you're someone that has been doing all the things and it seems like the needle is moving at a snail's pace, then I would have you really listen up, okay? Because all the insight in the world isn't going to stop you from attracting partners that are part of an old pattern, right? Or unhealthy partners, whatever that means, right? Emotionally unavailable partners, okay? And even worse, that's not going to stop you from feeling attracted to them. You can know all the red flags in the world, not going to stop you from feeling attracted to them. And this is when most people start believing, when it doesn't work, oh, there must be something fundamentally wrong with me because I've been doing everything right this time. I acknowledged all the red flags. I said all the right things. I didn't blow up over conflicts, right? And yet here they are in yet another familiar relationship, feeling unheard, rejected, or abandoned again. Okay. But it does not have to be this way. And if you can relate to this, you can give me a little comment there in the chat box. And if you want to know how to throw a wrench in that hamster wheel once and for all, my online course, Energy Expansion, can help. And there will be a link to that in the caption of this video. So what is this? This is an online course that uses guided meditation, art making, and experiential activities to literally activate your root and your sacral chakras. It's an embodied practice, okay? There are some lectures, but primarily we are working very viscerally, experientially, creatively, because remember, creativity is libido, libidinal energy, okay? We are working very directly with the parts of your body that connect to attraction and arousal. And we are going to be teasing out the threads of why are you attracted and aroused by partners that you have come to find are not that great for you, okay? Or partners that mirror back to you a thread, a string, a spectrum that's being plucked that you feel like, I don't want to keep learning this lesson, okay? So when we do this, we balance that energy. We amplify your attractive energy. You start to experience more passion and vitality, and you feel more confident. You can even feel more confident in revitalizing an existing relationship, okay? So how do you know if your root and sacral chakras are being affected? Well, we know that this is an issue for people with insecure attachment styles because you struggle to recognize and honor personal boundaries and other people's boundaries. This is especially to the sacral, I should say. You don't know how to say no, and or you don't know how to receive. You have a conflicted and usually a punitive relationship with your physical body and your self-image, whether that is discounting it, feeling very disconnected from it, or obsessing over it, crash dieting it, exercising it until it's the perfectly honed tool, right? These are both two ends of a spectrum. Feeling a desperate pressure to prove yourself and needing to earn love approval, struggling to make decisions on your own and kind of slipping into overwhelming thoughts and feelings with no clear direction or path. You struggle with the black or white, in or out, with me or against me type of thinking, worthy and unworthy, right? You feel anxious and a need to be productive and or to fix other people's problems to avoid being alone with yourself or your own feelings. Or maybe you've been told that you have codependent traits at some point in your life. Now, when you struggle with this kind of energy, okay, and it leads to goal-oriented pursuits to improve yourself, right? Those kinds of ideologies, while they are effective at a certain phase of development, if you're not there yet, they are going to throw fuel on the fire for you. And you cannot jump ahead. You cannot skip ahead, okay? And if anything I've said right now resonates with you, you're not ready to go there. You need to slow the F down and you need to dig into this, okay? So in this curriculum, I've developed a curriculum that is going to take you from confused to clear about how to scaffold that inner experience in a very visceral, nonverbal, creative way. There will be lectures explaining all of this if you need that, okay? But we're really going to get into this with a hands-on approach, okay? It's going to be very embodied. So we're going to put all of that expansive insight that you have gained into action so that you can start to feel differently instead of just knowing better, right? So more specifically, my goal with this course is to take you from habitually people-pleasing to claiming your pleasure and getting those needs met, sparing you the hopelessness over a FOMO dating culture, right? So that you feel confident and capable of finding or cultivating those deeply intimate relationships that you want. It's going to teach you how to stop clamming up and obsessing over red flags and start glowing with a receptive and magnetic energy instead, fully confident that you are going to filter out what you don't need and what no longer serves. We're going to squash that perfectionistic or punitive inner critic, and we're going to show you how to embrace yourself with self-love and compassion. We're going to eliminate automatic negative thinking. We're going to replace it with a receptive attitude towards fun and pleasure and play when it comes to love and relationships, when it comes to exploring the varieties of dating in the sandbox of life. Now, if you feel you want to be more confident and you want to attract those secure relationships, most people say, oh, it's not for me. They have a lot of negative stories that they're telling themselves. And it's true. You know what? The best time to start this work was what? 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. But you know when the second best time is? Right now. Right now. Okay. So if any of this has resonated with you, if your soul feels called to join me on this journey, I invite you to check out the link in the caption of this video. Enrollment for this course is open until the end of this month, which I believe is April 31st. I think we have 31 days in April. So I invite you to check it out. So I'm going to take a pause and I'm just going to see what has been offered here in the chat box. Let's see. First question, do you have some book about achieving soul sovereignty? I do not have a book specifically about the content for this particular concept. I have published 2 books. The first book is on attachment, complicated grief, and art therapy. And it actually has 14 protocols for working through complicated grief through the framework of attachment and creative arts approaches. It was a contributed volume. So we have a lot of wonderful practitioners contributing to that. The second book I co-edited, and this was on working with creative arts therapies in the LGBTQ community, similar sort of format as a contributed volume. In terms of this type of language that I'm using here today and this type of process, this is really only accessible through my online courses at this time, but we will have a book forthcoming. Thank you for asking that question. Okay. There seems to be a great deal of overlap between INFJ, avoidant, anxious, narcissism, buzzwords. So I know what these things are referring to. I'm not an expert. I don't know what I don't know what acronyms are. I don't have those systems memorized. In terms of narcissism, so I think it's important for us to understand that narcissistic traits exist on a spectrum. And when we have insecure attachment styles, it's because we have narcissistic wounding. So I'm going to be releasing a 3-part video series on how to conceptualize narcissistic traits, narcissistic wounding, all the way from just demonstrating some traits to having a personality disorder, and also the 4 presentations of narcissistic wounding, which some of those you may not expect. And then we're going to have a 2-part series on how to recover from narcissistic abuse and/or our own narcissistic wounding, and then an arts-based experiential to help us embody that. So I am going to be releasing a video series on that coming up. I don't usually talk about it in the same kind of diagnostic language that you will find a lot of people talking about it, because I think that's stigmatizing and usually leads to kind of a witch hunt, particularly in online forums. So it's not something that I talk about with that language, but I will be talking about it more directly in the coming weeks. Okay. I'm easily getting into new relationships, anxious attachment. I think that I need other people to make me happy. My relationships last 6 months. My anxiety is sabotaging them. Well, thank you for sharing that. So it's an interesting, we did do a video about this recently that we released about how there is a certain amount of time that we have to allow relationships to evolve, right? And in the beginning, whatever attachment style you have, usually, everybody's kind of excited. If you're dating someone that you're really into, whatever your attachment style might be, you're excited, you're sort of riding that wave. But once it seems, and it looks like, and it seems like it's evolving into a longer term relationship, now the attachment switches get flipped on. right? Because now it's like, oh, wait, this is serious. Oh, wait, now I'm going to start asking myself more serious questions, right? And that is when our early mechanisms for understanding intimacy get turned on. And we start to experience what are our automatic responses to attachment. Do we perceive it as a threat? Or do we perceive other threats to that attachment as being the focus of our attention, right? So I do have another video that explores that under, I have a playlist called Dating Culture, and I have a video that talks about that a little more explicitly. I just came from a lunch date with a jerk who invited a third party named Stacy, not a female, but a nice boat mechanic. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay. But is it really possible to completely lose the attraction for the partners who are wrong for us? For me, it's important to be able to recognize this attraction and then try not to act on it. Okay. So we would have to dig into the idea of right and wrong, right? Partner that's wrong for us. If you're attracting someone that's wrong for you, what's happening is they are mirroring back to you the other end of the spectrum that is plucked within you, right? We just talked about this right? So I'd have you go back and I'd watch this segment again. So this person said, that person's wrong for me because they don't listen to me, right? But then we explored what's the energy going on inside that person? I'm not heard. I'm going to be heard. I'm sick of not being heard. So what does that person attract into her experience? Someone that will be heard no matter what. And she's perceiving them as wrong for her because she's not being heard. But it's actually the same thing. It's the same. They both are actually inhabiting the same energy. She's used to suppressing it for a variety of reasons, right? And all the other unconscious stories that are telling her she needs to, because she's afraid if she says something, they'll abandon her or leave her. And that's the attachment anxiety, right? That's the attachment threat. So that's where the attachment style comes in, right? So it's not someone who's wrong for you. Once you dig into the lesson like this, and once you recognize what is the familiar string being plucked here, what is you being attracted to them? Quite honestly, when you do this in earnest, right? Now, if you're saying, I'm going to feel it and I'm not going to act on it, you're just torturing yourself, because you're still remaining on the surface of what's being mirrored back to you. You're focusing on content, right? You're not focusing on the energy. So you're going to continue to feel attracted to them. And then you're going to tell yourself you can't act on it, which is going to be a torture. Ouch. So I would encourage you to really check out my course, honestly, because that's where we're going to dive into this with more visceral, concrete way of understanding what I'm saying, right? Because this is, you're going to add more momentum to the push-pull that's happening in your relationship to these people. Because what's happening is you're inhabiting one end, they're inhabiting the other. It's the same string. So you're just going back and forth. Well, I'm going to feel it, but I'm not going to act on it. So now you're like going like this on the other end, and it's adding more energy to that resistance, right? That conflict, and you're going to torture yourself. So I would have you dig into that a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so I want to say thank you to all of you that joined me here for the live stream today. I'm going to come back tomorrow around the same time. I have one other question that I wanted to address that is fairly common, and that one is, why is it that my attraction, my arousal and or my attraction can be so high and then so low? We did discuss a little bit of that in a recent video release when we talked about sexual attraction and the human design system. In this case, it's someone who's talking about how on their own they can feel an intense sex drive, and then it goes away, and then suppressing it and goes away. And then it comes in again with certain partners, and then it goes away. And what's that about? How can I start to mitigate that? Right? And we're not looking at this through the framework of having a high sex drive is bad. That's not bad. But what we're doing is we're looking at when it feels like it's compulsive, when it feels like it's out of your control, when it feels like uncomfortable, you're starting to feel discomfort because of it. You're starting to feel compelled because of it. That is when it's important to start looking at these things energetically and understanding how and why sexual libidinal life force energy behaves the way it does where and when it does in your body and in your external circumstances. So we're going to talk more about that tomorrow, which is another facet of my course, Energy Expansion 101, that we dive much more deeply into. So again, I invite you to check out the link in the caption of this video if you want to learn more about this before the enrollment closes at the end of this month. Otherwise, I will be back here tomorrow at 3 p.m. to answer some more questions. Thank you so much for joining me.